There is a kind of exhaustion that cannot be repaired by sleep, vacations, or a quiet weekend away from responsibility because the fatigue does not come from physical effort alone. It comes from the invisible psychological weight of constantly being around people, interpreting emotions, monitoring reactions, adjusting behavior, and carrying conversations even when the mind desperately wants silence. Some individuals leave perfectly pleasant social gatherings feeling strangely empty afterward, not because anything bad happened, but because their brain never stopped working for a single moment while they were there. Every expression, pause, tone shift, and emotional cue is unconsciously processed in real time, creating a level of mental stimulation that slowly drains emotional energy beneath the surface. Outwardly, they may still appear calm, friendly, and socially capable. They laugh at the correct moments, respond politely, and maintain eye contact while internally feeling as if their battery is collapsing with every interaction. This creates a confusing experience because other people often assume the exhaustion is simple introversion or moodiness, when in reality it is closer to continuous cognitive overload. The mind becomes trapped in a constant state of awareness, where it is not only listening to words, but also analyzing intention, emotional atmosphere, hidden tension, and social expectations all at once. Even casual conversations can become mentally expensive because the person is continuously regulating themselves while also absorbing the emotional presence of everyone around them. After enough time, silence no longer feels like loneliness, but like recovery. Being alone becomes less about isolation and more about finally existing without pressure, interpretation, or performance. The exhaustion is especially difficult because it often remains invisible to others. People see someone functioning normally in public and assume they are fine, never realizing how depleted they feel once the interaction ends. Over time, this hidden fatigue can create emotional numbness, difficulty focusing, irritability, and a growing need to withdraw from unnecessary interaction simply to protect what little mental energy remains. Some people discover that the loneliest feeling in the world does not appear when they are physically alone, but when they are surrounded by others and still feel emotionally invisible. They can sit in a crowded room filled with conversation and familiar faces while quietly feeling disconnected from everyone around them. Outwardly, they continue smiling, responding politely, and participating at the correct moments. Yet, internally, there is a strange emotional distance that never fully disappears. Over time, ordinary conversations begin to feel increasingly empty because nothing meaningful seems to exist beneath the surface. Repeating the same discussions about work schedules, weekend plans, weather, or casual updates slowly becomes mentally exhausting because these interactions demand energy without creating genuine understanding in return. The problem is not that the topics themselves are bad, but that the person no longer feels emotionally nourished by conversations that never move beyond politeness and performance. As this feeling grows stronger, small talk starts feeling less like connection and more like emotional labor. Many people misunderstand loneliness as simply being separated from others. Yet, emotional isolation can become far more painful when someone feels unseen inside a room full of people. Silence eventually begins to feel safer than forced interaction, because silence does not require pretending enthusiasm or maintaining a socially acceptable version of yourself. A person may continue attending gatherings and answering messages while secretly feeling more detached after every interaction. This creates confusion because from the outside, they still appear friendly and socially active. Internally, however, socializing slowly transforms from something comforting into something emotionally expensive. Even pleasant gatherings can leave behind exhaustion because the interaction lacked sincerity, depth, or emotional honesty. As a result, solitude no longer feels like rejection of people, but relief from constant performance. What they begin craving is not total isolation, but fewer relationships that feel more genuine and conversations that carry emotional depth. Over time, emotional exhaustion begins changing behavior in quiet ways that are difficult to notice at first. A person may start avoiding invitations, replying late to messages, or inventing excuses to stay home, not because they hate other people, but because being alone suddenly feels far more peaceful than forcing themselves through another interaction. The clearest sign often appears in the relief they feel after canceling plans. Instead of disappointment, there is calmness and comfort, as if they have escaped something emotionally draining. That reaction matters because it reveals that social interaction has slowly started consuming more energy than it returns. As this depletion continues, patience becomes thinner even with the people they love most. By the time they reach family members, close friends, or a partner, most of their emotional reserves have already been exhausted by coworkers, strangers, obligations, and constant social performance throughout the day. Small comments begin triggering irritation that would not normally exist, creating guilt afterward because the frustration is directed toward people who never caused the exhaustion in the first place. Many individuals then begin fantasizing about disappearing somewhere quiet and distant, not in a dark or destructive sense, but in a peaceful one. They imagine a remote village, a cabin surrounded by nature, or a place where nobody expects constant communication, explanations, or availability. The desire is rarely about abandoning life itself. What they truly crave is freedom from the pressure of maintaining social roles and carrying the weight of other people's expectations every time they enter a room. Existing around others can start feeling like constantly managing different versions of yourself for different audiences, and eventually the mind grows tired of performing all of them. A quiet place with fewer demands begins representing emotional safety, simplicity, and mental stillness rather than isolation. One of the heaviest parts of emotional exhaustion is realizing that you no longer interact with people the way you once did. Many individuals quietly mourn an older version of themselves who used to answer messages quickly, stay out longer, enjoy crowded gatherings, and feel energized by connection instead of drained by it. They remember being emotionally available with far less effort, and the contrast between who they were and who they have become creates a strange form of grief that is difficult to explain to others. The sadness often comes from uncertainty because they do not know whether this change is temporary or permanent. They begin wondering if something inside them has slowly broken over time. However, the deeper truth is often far more compassionate than that fear. The growing exhaustion does not necessarily mean they have become cold, antisocial, or incapable of loving people. In many cases, it means their emotional awareness has become more selective about where energy deserves to be invested. Experiences that once felt harmless now feel draining because the mind has become more sensitive to emotional imbalance, superficial connection, and relationships that consume more than they nourish. As a result, relief after canceled plans, discomfort in crowded environments, and the growing desire for solitude are not always signs of dysfunction. Sometimes they are signals that a person has become more conscious of what genuinely supports their emotional well-being and what slowly empties it. The desire for fewer interactions often reflects a longing for more meaningful ones rather than complete withdrawal from humanity. Instead of wanting endless conversation, they begin craving honesty, calmness, emotional safety, and relationships where they can exist without constant performance or explanation. The transformation may feel painful at first because it forces them to let go of the identity they once carried so easily. Yet, it can also become a form of clarity. Rather than losing the ability to connect, they are learning that real connection becomes more valuable when it is rare,